KoitCast.
Today's guest is an author and trance medium. He has published several books featuring the wisdom of his spirit guide, White Feather, as well as 3 books of his own. He hosts a podcast, regularly runs online mediumship courses, and also gives private sit-ins. Please give a massive Koit welcome to Robert Goodwin. Hi Robert, and welcome to KoitCast.
Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Excellent stuff. Thank you for ever so much for coming. Let's start with the old classic. Who are you? Where you're from?
Okay. Well, I'm from Birmingham. I was born in Birmingham, grew up in Birmingham, lived in Erdington, and I've spent most of my life, in and around the Midlands here in the UK. I'm probably best known for being a trance medium, and particularly with one particular guide or teacher called White Feather. I've worked in spiritualism for 50 years now, 50 years, demonstrating for 45 years, done a number of books, and still working to this day online and doing live demonstrations. So it's been a great privilege, really. Yeah, I'll keep doing it as long as I can.
Quality. A question I ask everyone because it's very pertinent, but what was your paranormal introduction?
Paranormal introduction was probably when I was about 17. I went to, it was the first time I was away from home, and I went for a weekend down in Hastings on the Kent coast. And it was a weekend in a hotel that was organised by the Healers, local healing organisation, the Kent Healers. And I'd got an interest in healing, although I didn't know a lot about it. But I saw this course advertised this weekend in a local paper. I thought, oh, I'll go to that. So I went down on the train, arrived there on a Friday evening, didn't know anyone. Felt a little bit out of it, to be honest, because they all seemed to be, they were lovely people, but they all seemed to know each other. And he was this outsider coming in, and I introduced myself and we did all the pleasantries. But after the evening meal and chat, I thought, well, I'm going to retire now to my room. And it was a little sort of box room. It was a nice hotel, but it was on the front at Hastings. And it was basically a bed, a bedside table, a wardrobe and a sink. And that was it. And I drew the curtains, went to sleep. I mean, this was about, I don't know, 10:30, went to sleep. There was no light coming in from outside because there were heavy curtains and it was just, the room was dark. Went to sleep and I was awakened by what I can only describe as a ball of light that was hovering at the end of the bed. And it was about a foot off the bed. And this was about 3 o'clock in the morning. And it was lighting up the room. It was shining in my face. I wasn't frightened, wasn't intimidated. I just sat up in bed and looked at this, and I thought, this is some kind. It felt like it was a person or a being. It felt as though it wasn't just a light. It had sort of consciousness. I didn't know then what I know now. Had I known then, I would have tried to speak and communicate with it. So I just turned the light on, got out of bed, went to the loo, got back in bed. When the light was on, I couldn't see it. I thought it disappeared. Got back into bed, switched the light off, and it was still there. And because I initially, when I went down to the hotel, I felt like an outsider. I felt a bit nervous and that. I felt a comforting feeling from this whatever it was. And I turned over and I went back to sleep. Now, you might find that surprising because something as phenomenal as that, you'd think, well, you'd want to know more about it or converse with it. But I just felt I'll go back to sleep. In the morning, I felt totally different. The atmosphere had changed. Everything was different. People were friendly towards me and coming up to me. And I knew something had changed. And I've still got the memory of this, obviously, fresh in my mind. And I did sort of mention it to 1 or 2 people there's a lot of mediums there, obviously, and healers. And I think they looked at me a bit sort of odd a bit strange, as if to say, well, who are you? What are you
Strange
talking?
outsider, yeah.
Strange outsider from the Midlands with a Birmingham accent. Anyway, long story short, had breakfast, went into the first sort of meeting of the day, which was taken by a famous healer of the time. I can't remember her name, but she was giving a talk on healing naturally. And we sat in this room, and while the room was sort of filling up with people, I was sitting on my own, and there was a lady across the other side of the room, an older person, looking at me, staring at me, and I thought, what's she looking at? I don't know this lady. Eventually, she came over to me, sat next to me, and said, I was woken up in the night, she said, by my spirit guides. And she said, I wrote this down. And she opened a little handbag, opened a purse, got this little note out. She said, I've got to give you this note. I've got to give you this note. And that was it. She said, have a read of it and see what you think. And I opened it up, and it was written in what she referred to as automatic writing.
Hmm.
And it was, you are meant to be here for this weekend. You've got a lot of work to do for spirit. And it was signed by the name of a guide. Um, and I thought, wow, that's wonderful. And putting two and two together, right? You'll see the funny side of this. I reckon that the light that came to me and woke me up was the communicator. He didn't get any joy from me other than sending me sort of healing to relax me and whatever. And I think
Yeah.
he went round because this lady, I later found out, was in the next room to me on the first floor. I reckon he went round to her room, she being a medium, woke her up and says, look, you've got to take this down now. When I give you this, you've got to give this information to Robert in the morning. She didn't know who Robert was. And that's the way it worked out. So call that paranormal, call it spiritual, whatever. It was an amazing thing, and it's always stuck in my mind.
Well,
And
I
it's
imagine it
set me
would.
on
That
the
would never
road.
leave anyone, would it? A big ball of light in your room.
Well, I mean, literally, it was the size of a football, and
Mm.
it wasn't solid. It was like a bluey white. It was like plasma, you know, fluorescent, but it was the fact that it was lighting up the room. I actually went when I got out of bed and put the light on. I went and looked outside through the heavy line curtains to see if there was any way, any light, if there was an outside light or anything, could have got into the room to cause that effect, and absolutely, absolutely not.
It's obviously a defined edge thing, though, isn't it? Or was it diffuse, sort of like?
It didn't have an edge to it. Didn't have an edge. It was sort of, I don't know, it didn't seem to have like a defined edge. It was just sort of, it was a light that went into almost like a gaseous edge
Yeah.
to it. But I would say it was about, what, a foot and a half wide, circular. Um, and there was no sound from it. It was just like a vaporous, plasma type light that was shining, and it was, as I say, it was suspended about a foot above the bed.
Well, you're not
I've
alone
never
with that.
seen anything like that since, by the way. Sorry.
No, that's okay. You're not alone with that reaction to it, where you see something astounding and then, oh, I'll just go to sleep now, because that happens quite a lot across the paranormal fields.
Right.
Whether people see alien craft or same things you've seen in orbit, a lot of people like look at it, it's amazing, amazing, and then for all they know, they've just given up on it, which sounds weird.
It does sound weird, and I've not heard that said before, so that's interesting. I mean, the thing that, as I say, if it was communicating with me, and I felt it sort of was in some way, I felt it had come there for a purpose, and it was there for me. I didn't feel any threat, nothing like that, and it's quite the opposite, really. It was like comfort and love, if anything. And it certainly, I sensed there was some identity to it, but that was as far as it went. As I say, it was right at the beginning of my path, if you like, of mediumship. And looking back now, I wish I'd have sort of tried to communicate with it, but it was what it
Hindsight. Yeah, exactly. Two
yeah.
things here. One, you went all that way on your own as a 17-year-old, or you did say 17, didn't you?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's very brave. I always think that's brave of people to do things like that on their own.
Yeah, well, I mean, as I say, I was, I was an only child.
Ah,
I
okay.
wouldn't say I'd had a sheltered life, but I mean, I'd just started work. So I was sort of branching out a bit into the world, but I'd never been away on my own before. I'd always gone away with my parents or family or whatever. But I felt compelled to go to this place. There was a certain number of synchronicities that had led up to that involving healing. And I mean, I can share those with you if you want me to, but it was this interest in healing because I'd received healing and I thought, I'd been told, by the way, that I was a healer by this medium. And I thought, well, that's a good reason to follow it up and see if I am a healer. And as it turns out, that wasn't to be my main work, but it led me to this event, and I just felt compelled to go, And I thought, well, it's only a train journey, it's a 2 or 3 hour train journey and a taxi to the hotel, and I'll be safe, and I'll be with people that are of the same mindset, even if I didn't know them. So that's how it came about.
It's amazing, isn't it? I'm a big believer of the nudge phenomenon. And I say this a lot of my episodes, but there's small things along the way that push you in a direction towards the path that you're meant to be on. And your compelling is obviously part of that. And then obviously, do you think that light appearance or that whatever that thing was a marker or an announcement, another step along the way?
Absolutely. It was transformative for me. It made such an impression on me. And I mean, you talk about markers and being compelled. And I mean, I'd use perhaps the word synchronicity as well that came into it. And over the course of the years, looking back, I can see how certain events happen periodically in my life to nudge me in a certain direction and put me where I'm meant to be, or someone I meet that I'm meant to meet, or they come into my orbit, if you like. And I don't know whether any of your other sort of people that you've interviewed have sort of suggested this to you, but it seems to be something that's quite prevalent, in certain
Completely.
lives. And maybe it's recognizing it that's important, because I think not everybody recognizes these nudges when they appear, unless it's a really big nudge, and you just feel overwhelmed. I've got to do this, I've got to do that. But the more open you are to it, the more sensitive you are. I think the more often you seem to recognize these signs, and it's then
Yeah.
kind of, do you follow up on it or not? And I've never been disappointed in anything that I've followed up on, however bizarre it seems to be, because I think, well, somebody's telling me something here, I better listen to it.
Well, that's the thing. It's not only recognizing it, but it's understanding what it potentially could mean. I
Yeah,
think is
yeah,
key.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And you don't always know what the outcome's going to be at the time, but it's just like, I'll give you another example.
Hmm.
Um, Things that started to happen after this event, and there was sort of, well, let me tell you a couple of things. I was going out on business in a car the one day, and I thought, well, I've got to get, this was in Birmingham, I've got to get from here to here, and I'll go this particular route. As I turn into this road, I had this overwhelming feeling of just be careful here, just be careful. And there was cars parked down the road. And as I turned, it was a narrow road. This car shot out of nowhere, and I slammed the brakes on, and he missed me by inches. But I realised straight away I'd been given a warning. Another time, not long after that, I went into a tall building in Birmingham to see someone on the second or third floor. As I went to the lift, I had this strong feeling, don't go in the lift, don't go in the lift. It's going to stick, it's going to stop, it's going to break down. I ignored it, went in, pressed the
I know
button.
what's coming now, don't I?
You know what's coming, yeah. And the lift stopped, and I thought, well, you know what you think. What am I going to do? And I was looking around, and I pressed this button, and this guy came on the phone. Yeah, I'm stuck in a lift. Don't worry, we'll sort it, sir. And I was in there for about 15 minutes in the dark in this confined space. It wasn't a nice experience, but okay. But again, I wish I'd have listened to it. And I thought, yeah, somebody's keeping an eye on me here. So, from
A
that
question
point
at this
on,
point. A question. Is that voice, right? Do you think it is something else or someone else somewhere telling you be careful? Or is it part of you knowing that something could happen?
That's a good question. It could be either or. It could be a combination of both. I think as we develop, our consciousness expands, if you like. We become more aware. I think we are privy to information from other dimensions, other levels, you know, and there's definitely an aspect of that. I think I'm not one of these people that, well, spirit told me this, spirit told me that. I mean, I read a book once. I won't mention the medium. Wonderful medium though. But she said, my guides always tell me where to park, and they tell me which aisle to go down in the supermarket and what to buy. And I thought, really, really,
Mm.
I wouldn't like to get into that sort of relationship with
Well, no,
spirit.
because that's
I've got my own
micromanagement
life.
of
I've got
life.
free will, thanks.
Yeah.
But I think you do pick up on things that are non-physical as part of your natural sort of development process. So.
Mm. It's one we could ponder for ages. I mean, obviously, there's no measurement of it's this, it's that, is there? But
No,
it's
it's
more
it's it's hard to
conjecture.
define. It's hard to prove unless I said to you, I've physically heard a voice, and I have heard voices sometimes. They're not always in the head. They're out there. I've heard names called and my name mentioned and that. But on these occasions, it was neither. It was just a feeling, if you
Mm.
like. Now that could have been my own sensitivity, my own awareness, or it could have been someone, in another dimension, sort of putting that into my mind. I don't know. I can't prove either. But it was
Either
there.
way, fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's branch into trance mediumship,
Okay.
if that's okay with you. So, what is this form of mediumship, and how does it differ from other forms?
Okay. Well, I like to refer to it as the jewel in the crown of mediumship because I think it's at its best, it's a real connection with greater knowledge and understanding and wisdom that can come through to us. Now, all mediums work in altered states, even those that do, clairvoyance and psychic art and healing, whatever, they're in an altered state. Trance mediumship is an extension of that. Now, when I say altered states, I mean we all go into altered states of awareness and consciousness throughout the day. If we're focused on something, watching TV, reading a book, whatever we're doing, if we're focused on it, then there's a shift. And that altered state excludes other things that we would normally notice or be involved in. And we've all had the experience. I'm sure some of your viewers and listeners will have the experience of someone walking into a room while they're focused on something and calling the name, and they don't even hear it because they're so locked into what they're doing. So trance is a spirit-controlled altered state. So, in other words, there's an agreement between those whom I work with and myself that I will, if you like, surrender a part of my consciousness so that their consciousness can overlay mine and they can speak through me. When I'm in that trance state, there's still a part of me that's there, but there's a large part of me that's been shifted somewhere. I don't know where it goes to. I often say to people, that when I'm in that state, sometimes I feel as though I'm in the corner of the room or outside of the room. And when I come back, there's a feeling of dissociation, really. Where have I been? But that's as much as far as it goes, as far as my awareness is concerned. So I surrender my awareness or my consciousness to the guide that works through me, and there is a shift, a huge shift in terms of the way that they speak, the words they use, and obviously the knowledge and wisdom that far outstrips mine that they bring through. And there's a lovely sense of humor with them. I'm talking
Good.
about one particular guide called White Feather, who's worked with me for 50 years. And he's known for his compassion, his kindness, his knowledge, his wisdom, and interacting with people. And I always say to people, you must be the judge of what you're witnessing, you know. If it doesn't stack up for you, if it doesn't seem genuine, and there is some, unfortunately, there are those exponents of pseudo trance who really only fooling themselves, really. And I always say to people, the guide should be able to demonstrate not only a wisdom that is greater than me or the medium in any event, but should be able to answer the questions that are asked straight back. No hesitation. There's no, I'll go away and ask my mates, think
Yeah,
about it.
my
The
guide
answer's
mates. Yeah,
straight
fair
back
enough.
at you. And I've never known White Feather fail to answer a question. I mean, we're talking in the thousands over the years. So that's what trance is. It's an altered state, much deeper than mediums who just work in clairvoyance, demonstrations and things like that. So there's far less of me, or far less of the medium, and much more of the spirit guide or the controller that's working
Sure.
through.
Now, this whole you moving aside business,
Yeah,
it's a weird one. I'm not saying I don't believe it. No, that I'm
yeah,
on board with that. It's just the whole where do you go bit. Now, you obviously said you don't know where you go, and
yeah.
it feels as if you like get squashed maybe, so that your senses aren't there. Do you sense or see or hear anything, or are you just away?
I hear everything because
Oh,
the
okay.
guide uses my ears so that when we go to the question and answer section of the demo, he can hear what's being said. So my wife works alongside me, or has done for the last 25 years, because she helps to field the questions from the audience when we do a demonstration. And White Feather often jokes that he uses my ears, he uses my mouth, my eyes are closed, he uses my hands, but he doesn't use anything below the waist.
Good.
Much to the humour of my wife, all right? And we always have a joke about that. But literally, they don't waste energy. They energy is important because it's an energy based, system, if you like. So
Mm,
they conserve and they don't waste energy. I have asked the guide, as I said, where I go to.
mm.
The reason they don't tell me, or I don't get any sense of it, was because um, if they were to say to me, we're taking you here. For example, we're taking you to this place in the spirit world. We're taking you to the halls of learning, or we're taking you, to then my mind would be latching onto that. I'm going to go to the halls of learning. I'm going to go here or there, and that's from their point of view puts a block because you know yourself. If somebody tells you, give an example. If somebody tells you, you're going down to London, there's a lot of cracked paving slabs in London. Watch where you're walking. You go down there, you're going to be looking for every cracked paving slab that there is, and it's putting your mind into a certain channel, and they don't want that.
Yeah, I understand.
When Whitefeather starts linking with me, he's starting to give me information. He might just give me an outline of what he's going to talk about. So my mind's in that sort of groove. Once he starts coming through, then it's just him. It's just I can't stop it. It just flows through.
No, that makes sense now. You're put into an area, you don't need to know a lot about it, so your mind is clear, and therefore the channel, or whatever we want to call that, is also clear to help.
That's right. That's right.
Makes sense. What is the process? So, how, say you go into a room, how do you start it? Or do you not start it? Do they start it?
Um, if I'm doing like a public demonstration or an online one, I get very, I'm like a coiled spring before, and half an hour before, because I know that, this energy is building up with me, and I know it's going to be used in some, obviously in the trance state. Um, and my wife will often say to me, sit down, Rob. Why are you pacing back and forward? So I'm in the back room of a church or a hall, and I'm sort of pacing back and forward, and rather like an actor that's going on stage who
Yeah,
doesn't know
nervousness.
lines, because I don't know my lines. I've got no script. I don't know what's going to be said.
I can't believe you've not learned your lines.
That's right. That's the feeling. It's like, what am I going to say? What if I what if nothing comes through? It's never happened, never happened. So when I go out there, and we've done our preliminary talk, and I sit down. We normally play a little bit of background music, and I often joke to people, just to settle people down. It could be AC/DC, it could be Led Zeppelin, it could be Deep Purple, something quiet. And anyway, we put something really meditative on. We don't go into, but it's a bit of banter. Once that starts and I just close my eyes, it's like I can feel this energy, this person, this guide linking with me. And I can honestly say, Paul, the love that comes through, and people in the room can feel that love as well, is palpable. And it's the feeling of I'm here to serve you, I'm here to help you, I'm here to bring you knowledge and wisdom. It's that nurturing sort of feeling. As soon as he speaks, then, as I say, it starts to flow. And there's a different energy in the room. There's a different energy. Some people go, to trance demonstrations very skeptical, which I understand, and I always tell them in the prelim talk things to watch out for and things to avoid if you see the medium or the supposed trance medium pulling his face or her face or speaking in pidgin English or talking gobbledygook, walk out the door because that isn't trance. So I tell them what to look for. Soon as I start speaking and it's coming through, there's a whole different atmosphere. You still get some people who want to prove it's fake, that want to test you, and they'll ask the most complicated questions. But White Feather deals with it, spirit deal with it. They never fail to answer a question, and they always give an answer that usually elicits some kind of a, well, I never thought about it that way. That's really interesting. It's an intelligence. We don't want to insult anyone's intelligence. We don't want to speak over anybody because that's a waste of time. So they've got a way of, I suppose you could say they suss out the audience and the level of the audience, and they pitch it to that level of awareness, which isn't an insult. It's with respect, really, to
Well,
those.
that's exactly how teachers work, isn't it? They'll pitch their knowledge to
Yeah, I guess it
level
is
audience.
really. Yeah, I guess it is. Yeah, because
Well,
otherwise, what's the point? What's the point?
yeah, yeah, I completely understand.
Yeah.
Are you in control of the coming back in, so to becoming you again, or not?
Um, Pretty much, I think. There's a sense. Amanda, my wife, will often say to White Feather, "Can you go on? Do you want to go on for another 10 minutes, 15 minutes?" And he'll often say that he's fine, but I'm not. I'm getting tired. And that's sort of like the inroad, if you like, to well, we'll answer one more question. When he's done that and she's thanked him and he said his goodbyes to the audience, then it's an automatic process, really. It just sort of happens, and he sort of lets go, and I just feel myself coming back, and it usually takes a couple of minutes. I open my eyes and I'm thinking, where the hell am I for a second? Where have I been? What's happening? Sort of thing. Have a glass of water, and then it's like three, two, one. You're back in the room.
So it's like rousing from a deep sleep almost, in a
Yeah,
way.
yeah. From a nice sleep though, a deep.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, it's a good point that is because when you're asleep, you can't ever get to a point where you think, I'm going to wake up now. I better wake up, and you start to go through it doesn't happen, does it? You just wake up. It's the same when you go to sleep, and I often use this analogy. No one on this planet can tell me how they go to sleep. They might say, well, before I go to sleep, I do this, I do that. I get into bed, I have a cup of, Horlicks or something, and put my head on the pillow, whatever they do. But they can't tell me how they get from being awake to being asleep. It just happens. And the same thing coming back. And all that happens in sleep as well, which can be dreams, you know, it could be out of the body experiences, whatever. It could be nothing, it could be just deep.
Mm.
It just sort of happens. And it's the same with the trance state, really. I couldn't say to you, if you do this, this, and this, you will go into a trance state. And if you do this, 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 you will come out of a trance state. It doesn't happen like that. There's just like I don't know, it's beyond words, really. It just happens, you know. There's an
A
intelligence
random
involved.
displacement. Well, not a random one, a controlled
A
displacement.
control displacement, yeah, I think that would
Yeah.
be a good thing, you know. I mean, when we meditate, I don't know if you meditate, but a lot of people do meditate, and there's a nice feeling in meditation where you do sort of get a sense of being in a different state, you know. But I think a meditation is more controlled from the meditator's point of view, you know, because you can decide to come out of a meditation. You think, well, you know, the gong's gone now. I've been in meditation for 15 minutes. I'll bring myself out. And there's more, you know, personal willpower involved in that, I think. You know, so they're all different states of consciousness, awareness, you know.
Mm.
Um, that's the only way I can describe it, really.
I was thinking the same about obviously daydreaming. While you were talking then about the process, if I get lost and I'm just transfixed, I don't know, look out the window here as an example, and then you go into that altered state of just looking at the green of the trees,
Yeah.
I don't consciously think I'm going to stop my daydreaming now. It just happens, doesn't it?
It just happens, doesn't it? Yeah. Sometimes though, you know, sometimes you can be taken in by a beautiful scenery, like a bird on a branch or a tree or a sunset or sunrise. And in that moment, it's like you enter into a little gap between thoughts, and you're just there and you're just experiencing whatever it is that's caught your eye, and you think you're captivated by it. Then, of course, the mind kicks in and starts saying, well, have a look at that. Well, that's, you know, and it makes this commentary. The mind kicks in and starts this commentary. And I think it's that pulls you back into mind, pulls you
Mm.
out of that whatever state that is, that little gap in between thoughts. And the mind then has to commentate on it. And then you're into a whole narrative, you know, you're back into the world of thoughts and perceptions.
Do you realize you've just created a title for another one of your books, which is The
No?
Gap Between Thoughts? You should use that. I think that's a great phrase.
Yeah, I might well do. That's a nice
It's
thought.
a nice image. I love it.
Yeah.
When you're in this state, and obviously White Feather has come in and doing all the stuff,
Yeah.
have you got video of yourself that you look back on and think, oh crikey, look at me doing that?
Yeah, there's a few on the website that's quite a lot of them were taken at a particular venue in Northampton over the years, because I used to go there every year and do a demonstration, and this guy was very much into filming it, you know, with permission, and he sent me a lot of videos that are still up there, and occasionally I'll do one on my own, sitting in front of the computer screen on Zoom or something like that, and record it and edit it and put it out. And I do look back on them. I don't like looking at myself, even though it's White Feather working through me. I don't like, because I'm always critical of myself, and I think that's not a bad thing, really, because it keeps your feet on the ground, you know. I'm very, very, very big on humility, and you know, there's enough egos out there who think they are the great I am, you know. So I'm very, very critical in that regard. So, but I think I trust that what comes through White Feather, whether it's filmed or not, is authentic and worthwhile. So it's enough to know that if, you know, I put a video out there or someone else does, I can trust, you know, I haven't got to scrutinize it and play it through and edit it, because it is what it is. And if
Hmm.
White Feather's brought it through, then it's worthwhile, you know.
When you first saw a video of yourself, though, did you think, whoa, look at me doing that? That's not me.
Yeah, 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 and I did, yeah, and sometimes I still think that, you know, I still, and I listen to the language that's used, you know, and the way it's conveyed, and I think, well, that's all right. That is, you know, that white feather, that guy is worth listening to. And if I was a novice going in, now, and I've seen that, I think, yeah, I'd like to listen to that. He's got something to say, whether I agree with it or not, it's worth listening to. And I think the moment I stop believing in that and believing in him and whatever comes through, I think that'd be the time to quit, really. But it hasn't happened yet. So
I imagine you went through the journey of disconcerting initially, right to the you're fully au fait with it now. Okay with it.
yeah, yeah. And I'll tell you something, Paul. I'm not an outgoing person. When I came into developing this, and I sat in a development group for 6.5, 7 years almost. I mean, that's a story in itself. I mean, we sat in an old air raid shelter, converted air raid shelter at the back of a church in Birmingham. The church was called Earlsbury Gardens in Birmingham. It was an old spiritualist church, and it was a disused air raid shelter that the guy that ran the circle, he sort of fitted it out and everything. And the energy in there was palpable. And I sat in there for, as I say, 6.5 years until one week. I mean, the guide had been speaking through me regularly. He would come through every Friday evening. We sat, and one week the circle leader said, right, he said, I'm going to put you on the platform, which is a spiritualist platform, in a month's time. And he said, you're going to start speaking in public. And I wished a hole could have opened up and just I could have fallen into it, because I'm not an outgoing person. I'm normally quite reserved. I used to be back then really shy, but I thought, well, okay, it's obviously meant to be. And over the years, I've become more confident in public speaking. But if you'd have said to me back then, you're going to be a public speaker and you're going to address people, I'd have run a mile. Um, but the thing is, that they've given me that confidence, and that's borne out by the results, whether it's giving a reading to someone, a message to someone, or whether it's bringing wisdom through. You see people's faces and you get the comments, and I'm not interested in praise or anything like that, but it's just nice sometimes to say, thank you for that. That was
Mm.
that's helped me. That's my reward, really.
And I like that approach because I also try my best to follow the humble path because what is the point of going, I'm the big I am? There's just no need for it. And I like your
It's
message.
embarrassing, and yet
It is,
I
yeah.
still see it. I still see it, and it appalls me, really. But people
Mm.
are what they are,
Well,
So
exactly. Different strokes, different folks, and all that, or different
yeah,
folks for
yeah,
different strokes,
yeah.
whatever that phrase is. In theory, right? Could uh, a guide or another spirit or whatever inhabit you, or whatever that phrase you would use is, and keep themselves in there so that you're lost forever? Is that a potential, or is it limited by energy and stuff?
It is limited by energy. There are, devious people over there in the sort of lower astral planes, as there are on Earth. People who would like to coerce you and get you to do things that you wouldn't normally do.
Mm.
There's all sorts of examples of that going on. Some of it covert, some of it overtly. Regarding sort of the connection with anyone or any entity in the astral plane, as long as you follow certain procedures and you're not silly, and you're sensible in your approach, then there's no way they can attach themselves to you. The numerous examples of lower entities attaching themselves to people, usually through a person's own stupidity or rather naivety, you know. Your intent, first of all, is your protection. If you've got the right intent and you're sitting not for me, but you're sitting for the greater good, and you're sitting in love, and you set that out, that's a good protective mechanism. If you're messing about, with alcohol, you've had a drink, or drugs, or let's say your character is a lower nature, and you're up to things that you shouldn't be doing, you're going to draw those sort of people to you or entities to you from the other side, and like attracts like. And I mean, even things like messing about with Ouija boards, you know, going into places where you're not protecting yourself. And I know there's a lot of paranormal investigators, and I applaud them, but I'm sure they take the right steps to protect themselves,
Well, you'd
If
hope
they
so, wouldn't
don't,
you? Yeah.
then they're dicing with I won't say danger, but that at risk of some entity, attaching themselves to it. So as long as you're sensible and you've got the right attitude, I think that's sufficient usually.
Quality. Thank you. Um, you've got a wife, have you?
Yeah, yeah.
How did the topic of your abilities first get raised, and how did she take it?
Well, we sort of met, how long ago now? I don't know, 27, 28 years ago. We were both in relationships, but I was sort of, doing a development group myself, and she was in that, and I think she was there because she was meant to be, and so she was exposed to the kind of work that I was
Okay.
doing. She was drawn into that field anyway, and it sort of, things sort of led on from there really. So it wasn't a complete shock that I suddenly started doing this. She was
Hmm.
already aware of what I did anyway. So yeah, that was it really.
So it's an easy one in that respect, because I can imagine if
Yeah,
it was a case of rolling over in bed one night, oh, by the way, I do this, and then it's like, what the? It would be that sort of,
yeah,
yeah,
or levitating, on the bed. Yeah, I
yeah.
can imagine that.
While your
Yeah.
head's spinning round, that's right. Yeah, don't do that.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get on to white feather. Can you explain who or what is white feather from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I know some people will say, "Oh, another Red Indian, Native American Indian guide." Yeah, and I think he would laugh at that himself. Really, there are a number of sort of Native American guides, as there are sort of Chinese and other sort of brackets, that seem to fall into those brackets. So I can understand to a degree the sort of skepticism that could come from some quarters. But the interesting thing with White Feather was I didn't know who he was when he started speaking through me, and he'd been speaking through me for, I guess, a couple of years. I had no idea of his name. He didn't tell me his name. And then one evening, I was sitting at home, just meditating, and I saw the face of this man, and he gave me the name. So my initial thought was, oh yeah, right, okay, I'll take it, but prove it to me. Um, which he did through another medium who gave me this name out of the blue, and I thought, thank you, that's the answer to that. Few years later, now she's going quite a few years later, when I was with my wife, we had a message one night. She asked him where he was from when he was on Earth, and he said he was a member of the Blackfoot tribe of Montana, and he said he'd lived, quite a few hundred years ago. I can't remember whether he was specific on the date. And he showed us a map, and he said, if you can get a map of America, have a look in this area, and this is where you'll find that I lived. And we did this, and through a process of tracking things down and elimination, we found this sort of area where the Blackfoot tribe sort of hung out, you know.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and there was a few places, and we actually planned to go on a trip. We did go to America for our honeymoon. We didn't go to Montana, and there's a place called which isn't exactly where they were, but there's a place called Buffalo Jump Head Smashed In or something like that. One of these lovely Indian terms. And we thought, oh, we must go there. We never did get there, but he sort of took us into more detail of the area that he lived in, and that was nice as well, to get that confirmation. So, I know you were talking to Sandy, weren't you, Sandy Ingham?
Yes, yes.
I don't know whether she told you about her guide or not, how he led her to Italy and to the very place where
Yes.
he lived, you know. So this is a similar thing to that. So I always say to people, by the way, and I'm glad you've raised this point because I work with sort of training people to develop trance. And the first thing they want to know is who's my guide? Who's my guide? Who's working through me? You know, and I say, don't worry about that. Don't worry about it. They will tell you when they're ready to tell you. And I know it involves a little bit of trust, a lot of trust, really. Um, but I'll tell you the reason why. And it goes back to what we were saying earlier. There's a lovely saying from Krishnamurti, who wasn't a spirit guide. He was a teacher that lived on Earth. I don't know if you've heard of Krishnamurti, but
Hmm.
he said something like, when you tell a child the name of the bird that the child's looking at, the bird sitting on the fence, and you say to the child, that's a blackbird or whatever, that child never sees that bird again. He only sees the blackbird. He only sees what you've named it as. Never sees it in the pure state again. And this is a great analogy because guides, this is why they hold back information until the medium's ready to know it, because otherwise the medium's going to be looking to sit, you know, and link with so and so, you know, Red Eagle or, you know, whatever. Mr. Ho, Mr. Po, your Chinese guide, he's going to be looking for that, you know, and they don't want that because it's colouring the mind. Does that make sense?
It does. Grant Cameron, who I spoke to recently, expressed that same thing. Is that once you name something, it puts it in a box and you miss the rest,
Yeah,
so to speak.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, it's a weird phenomenon, but I understand it.
yeah.
The Native American thing. I'm glad you raised that as a why is it always Native American? My
Mm,
nan was quite a famous medium from Gloucester, right?
right,
And her spirit guide was a Native American Indian.
right.
And it struck me as not odd, but it was one of those things even back then. I mean, we're talking 30, 40 years ago that scenario was happening. And I was always thought then, why always an American Indian? But then since then, you always think, well, maybe it's because American Indians were close to the land, close to nature, therefore open to it all, open to the universe and thing. Is that
Let me
your thought
share.
process?
Yeah, absolutely. And let me share this with you as well. That is true, what you've just said. They were. Um, White Feather said that, as you know, that a lot of the American Indians were persecuted at the time. You know, a lot of them were wiped out. You know, and I have to say, by the white race. You know, that were coming to rule America. You know, who persecuted the natives, didn't want them. They wanted the land, and they wanted them out of the way, really. And a lot of diseases were introduced. You know, like smallpox and
Hmm.
other things that they had no immunity to because they didn't exist at that time. And he's often said, despite that happening, how wonderful, how beautiful, how humbling that Native American Indians should come back now with no malice, working through predominantly white people, white mediums. I'm not saying mediumship is purely of the white race because it isn't. There's a lot of, you know, black and ethnic, all colours, all races. But how beautiful that they come back in love. And he said he used me as an example. He said, I'm coming back as a Native American, part of a race that was persecuted, to work through a white man, you know. And he said there's a lesson in that. There's a lesson in that, you know, in forgiveness.
For
There's a,
himself and for you, in a
you
way. Yeah.
know, yeah. And the other thing to that, which I'll just say quickly to you, a few years ago, she's going back, when I say a few years, probably 15 years ago, I started getting a lot of abuse online from an American, Native American website that had come across my name. And who was this UK medium, you know, with White Feather speaking through. White Feather wouldn't speak through someone like that. They would come through a native, American. They would come through a native person like ourselves. These were all Native Americans currently living, and I started getting all this like abuse and questioning. Well, who are you to do this? And they were really scrutinizing me. In the end, I mean, I answered the best I could, but in the end, I had to block them because whatever answer I gave, they were so locked in, to their philosophy that they couldn't accept that one of their elders would come back and speak through someone like me. I actually made contact with Long Standing Bear, who was at the time the current leader of the Blackfoot. He was very skeptical to begin with. We exchanged a number of emails. I never actually spoke to him like you and I are speaking now. And he sort of mellowed and he accepted and he came round. And I felt as though, I wouldn't say I won him over, but I felt as though he was a reasonable sort of person.
Hmm.
He was always a little bit wary, but he had more about him than that. And I was pleased with that. And that's how we sort of left it, really. I think some of those posts on that website are still online. Things on the internet don't
They
disappear.
don't
They're there
die. No, they're
forever,
always there.
you know. But it was an interesting experience, put it that way.
Yeah, see, I would never have thought that you would have said a group of Native Americans would have attacked in that way because they would almost be more open to the possibility you would expect. Maybe
You would
that's,
expect,
yeah.
but I respected, despite what they were saying, I still respected their views because they were a persecuted people. And even in recent times, I mean, we went out on our honeymoon to California, and we actually got chatting to one or two people out there, and they said that they were so badly treated by the US government, and the US government has tried to repatriate in some way, and a lot of the, you know, I've got to be careful here because I don't want to, taint everybody with the same brush, but some native descendants fell into, abusing drink and that sort of thing
Oh, yeah, yeah. It's
because
common.
they were so suppressed and they didn't have the same equality that the white man did.
And not only that, they're susceptible to it because they didn't grow up with a lot of alcohol, whereas the Europeans did. So it
That's
affects them
right.
more.
That's right. And in some sort of perverse way, the American government gave them back sort of things like casinos and plots of land, sort of trying to say, well, we're sorry for what we did, have this and they were making money out of that, but they were making it out of, gambling and casinos and that, which years ago, I mean, they wouldn't have even known about that. They wouldn't have gone near that. Um, so I think there's still this sort of, which you can understand, bitterness, amongst some of them. I won't say all of them, but you can understand it.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
They were a race that were persecuted and suppressed, and a lot of them. You've probably heard of the Trail of Tears.
Hmm.
We've actually been doing a bit of work I've been working with two or three other mediums to try and sort of heal that because we could say that the pain of that still exists on one level. Um, but you can understand from their point of view, you know, having been persecuted, why would I be involved in any way with anything that they were or are or could be?
Well, your previous answer was that there was some measure of forgiveness to your guide, and then
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
race doesn't matter. If we're all energy, it's irrelevant anyway. Do you know what I mean? So
Correct.
that answers that. Um,
Correct.
does every single person have a spirit guide or set of them? Do you think?
I won't say guy. I think we've all got someone that I prefer the term helper. Maybe it's a loved one, a parent, a grandparent, someone that's drawn to you that sort of, I won't say they're there to sort of constantly keep a watch on you and keep you out of trouble and that, because we're all here for a purpose. We've got our own free will. But I think naturally there's certain people over there that are drawn to you, either because they know of you, they've known you, they've lived with you, so there's some connection there. As far as guides go and teams, I think guides are more connected with mediums because mediums generally have got work to do. You
I
know,
see.
we're here to sort of spread the message of truth and in a non-religious way, prove life after death, and therefore we're going to attract those sort of entities that have got something to say and give this evidence and this proof and this knowledge. So it's more likely that we're going to have a guide or a team of guides with us, whereas, the average person, and I say this in all humility because I don't talk about, mediums being better than anybody or greater than anybody, but
Yeah, I
all
got more guides than you, that sort of
yeah,
thing.
yeah, I've got more guy, I've got this guide, and none of that. We're all equal. We're all part of God's being.
Hmm. Um, do spirit guides have guides themselves?
Great question. Great question. It's the way it's been explained to me is that they work through mediums to get mediums on Earth. That they work through us to give information and knowledge. They themselves also link with guides who are higher than them, more advanced, if you like, and it's like a waterfall effect. They can get information, they can pass it on through a medium, and it's a reciprocal sort of thing in that regard. Um, you might say, well, why don't the guides on level so and so give it direct? Why do they have to come through another medium, if you
Hmm.
like, another guide in the spirit world? And the understanding I've got is the more, for want of a better word, advanced, I don't like using that word, but the more rarefied, the more refined the atmosphere of where you are in the spirit world, the harder it is to connect directly with this lower level that we're on called Earth. So it's a better idea to come through an intermediary. It's rather
Yeah.
like, if you like, using an analogy, it's rather like the President of the United States speaking to you and I. It'll never happen, but he might come through a third or fourth party to get a message to us via a law or something that's put in place. That's their way of communicating with the
Hold on,
masses,
I've just got a call. It's from Mr. President. So sorry, I just have to take this.
Mr. Biden, is it all?
Yeah. Well, he wouldn't be calling it.
No, he wouldn't. Might be Donald. Might be Donald ringing you. Yeah.
Exactly, it will be. A weird question that goes along with that, and actually, before I get into that, the analogy I had in my head was like internet in a tower block. Say you had your router on the bottom floor, you couldn't get that message all the way up to top, and vice versa. Then you'd have to send it through hubs, wouldn't they?
That's a great analogy. Why
Yeah.
didn't I think of that? Yeah.
No, no, yours was good anyway. It's exactly the
No, I
same
love
thing.
that though. It's a good one. Yeah.
It's just what was in my head. Okay, so a weird question on top of the other thing. So I'll try and read this verbatim because it's a strange one. If spirit guides do have guides, and you kind of alluded that they do, can a trance be achieved whereby White Feather comes in, but then he is taken over by his guide? So it's like a nesting doll of trance.
Yeah. That's a great question. I don't think he's ever been asked that question. I don't know what answer. I can't speak for him.
Hmm.
My only thought would be that if he's trying to sort of lower his energies to connect with me and work through me, I think it may be difficult to sort of do two things at the same time and have somebody work. He's attuning with somebody higher than him, but he's also trying to attune with somebody lower
Lower.
than
Yeah.
him. It's rather like, I guess, trying to tune in a radio to two stations at the same time. You've either got to go there on the dial or you've got to go there, and then you can't do both.
Yeah.
That's what I would guess he would probably say.
Yeah, makes sense. But
Yeah,
it's a
I
nice one
think
to
I think
ponder.
I think if that was going to happen, he would get the information prior to linking with me from his higher source, and that source would download that information to him and say, look, next time you're working through Robert in a trance state, maybe you can share this with him. Maybe you can. That's how it works, I think,
Hmm.
rather than in real time.
Well, don't they say that time doesn't exist there? So they
They
have all the
do.
answers then
That
anyway.
they do. Yeah. That's probably not the best, analogy to use. Yeah. time comes into play, time and space. I understand at this level of mind, where the higher soul or the spirit, if you like, localizes itself through each of us in this area of mind and perception and time and space and subject and object, past and present, here and there, up and down, all of those things come into play at this level of being, but they don't exist at the higher level. It's a different experience totally. Having said that, um, I'll share something with you if I may, and
Hmm.
I've never shared this before. My
Is
my
it your
dear
bank
mother
account?
passed. Sorry?
Is it your bank account?
No, I'm not telling you that. No, no. You can ask me all day. I won't give you those details. My dear mother passed a couple of years ago, and she was a good healer, great healer. Um, and she often said to me, when I go, Rob, I want to work with you from this side. I'd love to. You know, I've not only sensed her around, I've heard her call my name. I've actually seen her. In a physical.
Mm.
Not just in my mind. I've seen her. It was one morning when I woke up and she was leaning over me in bed. Um, but I'm aware of her very often sending healing when it's needed, or when I talk to her, if I sort of hold her picture and I talk mentally to her, I know that she hears it because she responds. And it's difficult to explain to people unless you've experienced it. And very often, and this will make people laugh, but it's absolutely true. She will come on a weekend. She will come overnight on a weekend, like a Friday night or a Saturday night. It's almost like she's saying, well, you've done your work throughout the week. Weekends, people generally sort of relaxed and chill. That's when I'm going to come and link with you. So that suggests to me she's aware of time.
Mm.
Somewhere, wherever she is, she's aware of time, or she's certainly aware of my time, my timeline. And when this started to happen, it took me a few weeks or months to realize. I said to my wife, she's coming at weekends. How is that possible? It's almost like there's a message in that information itself that we are aware of your time, your days, your activities. I'm not saying she's sort of there all the time or she's interfering or anything. She lets me live my life. But there's such a link between us. I think it's her way of saying, you know, I know what's going on, and I'll come with you on these nights, and well, for whatever reason, it's phenomenal, really.
It
It
is. It's
blew me away when
fascinating.
it started to happen.
The whole time thing that we think of, right? Because we're all of this world here right now. You cannot reconcile in my brain where time doesn't exist. You can sort of understand it, but you can't really understand it. So it's such a weird thing to ponder.
Well, if you look at it this way, if I was to say to you now, where are you on this time, on this continuum? You might say, well, it's such and such a day and time. That's only something a conception created by the mind. The days of the week, the hours of the day don't exist except as a concept. So you could say, well, I'm in this moment
Hmm.
now. I'm in this
I
moment.
mean, now, yeah.
You're in now. People often say, I'm in this moment. Well, how long is a moment? Is it a second? Is it a nanosecond? Is it a day? Is it a week? So there can only be one moment, and that moment is now. And they say, well, what about the past? Well, the past is only as a memory in the now. The future is only as an idea or a conception or a projection in the now. So you can never escape the now. It's inescapable. Where would you go to? Where could you possibly go to outside of the now? And so you start to look deeper into it. What is this now? And I won't go into this now, but no pun
No
intended.
pun, yeah.
But you can actually go right into the heart of your true nature and God's being. You can actually find what you are by following this pathward inward, starting from the now and going inward, you know, and that's something we could explore if you wanted to. But it's a fascinating thing, I tell you. It's life changing. It was life changing for me, you know.
I don't want to dismiss that thread, but I
Yep.
know that with our time left, we got about half an hour left. I
Yeah.
got a
Yeah.
few more questions. I know I would go off wildly on that one with loads more
Okay.
questions. So maybe we can keep that for the future if you're amenable to it.
Yeah. Yeah. You sure? Yeah.
Thanks kindly. Okay, so I want to do quickly ask about your mum though. When you saw her,
Yeah.
when you woke up, how did she present herself? Was it us the age you saw her when she passed on? Was it a younger self? What sort of clothes was she wearing? All that sort of thing, you know?
Okay. She was younger. She was, I would say, in her 30s, the way I remembered her, with her hair in particular. Um, I sleep on the left of a double bed, and I
Hmm.
was turned. I was sleeping on my left side. I woke up and I saw this figure of her bending over. She was leaning over to me with her arms outstretched as though she was sort of embracing or sending healing, perhaps. She wasn't solid. She was, it was like a, a bit like the light that I saw that I
Hmm.
described at the beginning. It was like a luminescence about her, and it was mainly white, but I could see her features clearly. And the most telling thing was I knew her energy. I felt her closeness and I knew her energy. You know, when you've lived so long with a person, you can feel their energy, their essence, you can almost smell them, you can almost taste their energy. That was what came across very strongly. I reached out my hand, both hands actually, to touch her, just to embrace her, and my hands just went straight through her, and from that point she dissolved. So the whole process was about 3 or 4 seconds, you know. Um, Another occasion when she came, I was in that sort of intermediary state of sort of I wasn't asleep and I wasn't quite fully awake. But I heard her call my name in her tone of voice, and it was right in my ear, almost as though it was like she was, if you went up to someone and you spoke into their ear, and it woke me up, And I said to my wife, I just heard my mum call out my name, and that's happened a couple of times. Um, so as I say, her way of linking is usually overnight. I think mainly because my everyday mind, my conscious mind is sort of out of the way to a degree, and I'm in more of a relaxed state, and maybe I'm sort of slightly out of the body or whatever. I don't know, but I think
Mm.
it's easier. It's easier for her to connect, and I've known that's happened with others have had that as well. A lot of work goes on overnight with all of us. We're either out somewhere, we've left the body and we're astral traveling, or those in the afterlife are drawn close to us because they know they can drop a seed of evidence, or just say hello, because our minds, either it been in the sleep state and it's subdued, or it's not quite fully engaged in whatever we normally do during the day, which is so focused and intense.
Mm. I have two
That's the way.
questions on this before
Yeah.
we move on to the more
Yeah. Yeah.
questions about the trance stuff. Why do you think that they say your name into your ear? What is the point of just saying your name? Is it just "Hello, I'm here," or is it something else?
I think with my mom, she got such a distinctive way of talking that I think it was a recognition. I recognized her voice straight away. It was her voice. Couldn't have been anybody else's voice. I think for her to convey something else, perhaps would have required more energy. I don't know whether she draws on my energy in order to make this manifest, or whether it's purely her own energy. But we spoke briefly earlier, we touched on the fact that we're all energy.
Hmm.
Mediumship requires a lot of energy, particularly when you're going into the realms of physical mediumship where you can get manifestations, you can get apports, and you can hear, independent voice. It takes a lot of energy and a lot of focus from the communicator. So I think maybe she sort of honed in on her options, and it was probably better just to call my name out, knowing that I'd recognize it instantly, rather than try and get
Something
anything other
else. Yeah.
information through.
And I suppose that will be the answer to this question, which I'm also going to ask about when you saw the image of your mum and you put your hands out, she then dispersed, or whatever you want to call
Yeah.
that. Why did she disperse at that hands out moment rather than staying there another 2, 3 seconds or whatever?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know whether it's because my sort of conscious everyday mind was waking up, and that sort
I
of
see.
blocked it out.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Funny enough, I had a similar experience maybe 10 years ago. My mum was still alive then. This was with another person. I don't know who it was. I woke up early hours of the morning. In fact, it was it was still dark. It was sort of, it's still nighttime really. And I was aware of a form. It was a lady's form. It looked to me like a Native American Indian. That's the only way I could describe it. And she was hovering over me, and she got her hands out like that, like she was healing or giving energy or something. And she was so real. And a similar thing happened. I sat up in bed and I put my hand out, and she just disappeared. The same thing happened. My hand went straight through her, and she just disappeared. So I'm guessing the same thing happened there. They like to work, overnight when the mind's subdued. They like to work in the quiet, in the stillness. And when we wake up, the sort of mind cuts in, I think, and they think, oh, it's time to go now,
Mm.
go back off.
Or it severs the connection itself.
So yeah,
However,
yeah,
yeah.
probably the latter. It severs the
Mm.
connection, I think, probably, yeah.
That's quite.
Sadly, but,
Yeah. It is a sad thing. It's a sly thing that they do all at night. Not nefariously sly, but it's a sly thing that they're there. And that probably also then contributes, unfortunately, to the fear of people that when they do wake up, oh, there's a spirit. That sort of thing. So
yeah,
it's a give and take of intention there.
I think some people would be like, "Oh God, I'm frightened of this. It's a ghost or it's whatever they. I mean, that wouldn't happen with me because of the knowledge I've got.
Yeah, exactly.
But, you can see why some people would, and then it gets all twisted up, and the house is haunted and this, that, and the other, and it's nothing of the kind. The number of times I've done sittings for people and they've said, "I've seen this and that," are they okay? Why are they in trouble? Are they earthbound? Why are they coming back? And I say, no, they're just there to let you know they're around.
Mm. Or
I mean,
doing
don't
their
get me
work.
wrong, hauntings and paranormal things do take place, but that's another thing altogether.
Completely. Back to the guides. Have you ever doubted the guides?
I always question it. I always question it. I'll tell you one thing that happened to me. A guide, well, White Feather actually said something through me years and years ago when I was still developing. I was still sitting in the circle in the group. And when he said it, something flagged up in my mind because you've still got this critical sensor in your mind. You know yourself, if you hear a news item or you read something and you think, well, hang on, that's dodgy, I don't believe that, it doesn't fit my belief system. Well, it was that kind of thing when he was speaking through me. Because I was in trance, it didn't stop, that he carried on talking, but it just sort of, something flagged up in a part of me. Afterwards, I asked the circle leader, White Feather said this. He said, the thing was about, he'd said something about all rivers go to the sea. And it just sort of flagged up. And I said to the circle leader, is that true? I said, White Feather said this. I said, do all rivers go to the sea? And he said, well, no, not necessarily. Some might dry up, some might flow into a lake, some might flow into another river, or whatever. And so he said, that's not quite right then, is it, Bob? Because he used to call me Bob. And I thought, well, that put a whole doubt in my mind that White Feather had given me something that wasn't quite correct. Me being me, I always want to get to the truth. So next time I link with him, I put the question, because you can put questions to them. Can be a two-way link. And he said, right, you're right to raise this. He said the reason this was happening, and he gave me a lovely analogy. Now, you being a young man, you won't remember typewriters that were the old mechanical kind. Maybe you will.
I'm older than I look.
Okay, you're older than you look, so am I. So we're on the same page. And the old typewriters, you could press a letter and two would go up at the same
Yeah,
time.
yeah. Always happened to me because I was doing it too fast.
Doing it too fast. And Whitefeather said, that's what happened. And he said, I realized it as soon as the thought had come. He said, and I couldn't correct it. He said, I put this thought in and it produced this reaction. So it was a learning thing for him. But he agreed with the outcome of it. And he said, it's something to be aware of. He'd learned something. And he said, hopefully you have. And he said, it was good that my mind flagged it up. And I always say to this when I'm saying this to people, when I'm working with training people, you must scrutinize, and this brings me back to your original question, always scrutinize whatever's given to you, wherever it's from, whether it's from this plane or the spirit, will always question it. That's your right as a person. If it sits right with you, if it feels right, go with it. As far as spirit guides concerned, and I'll just finish answering this question with it. Whitefeather says to me, I cannot lie to you. I cannot lie to you. He said, if I lied to you, they'd take my license away from me. So that's his humor coming through. But I know what he means, that they're not out to lie, So you've got to trust. There's got to be a certain amount of trust between you.
Of course. And then it goes back to that thing you said before, that they're not perfect and there's learning both ways, although Absolutely. It might be weighted heavily in your direction. But yes.
Absolutely. And one other thing on that as well, just mindful of the time here. People often say to me, and this winds me up as well. They say, well, spirit told me this, spirit told me that. And I'm saying, no, they didn't. Spirit is not one body of common knowledge and wisdom, just the same as the earth plane is filled with people of different levels of awareness and understanding. That doesn't resolve when you pass over. There's still ignorant people or less knowledgeable people over there. So what you're actually saying is, my spirit team have told me this, or my spirit guide has given me that, and if you accept it, fine. But don't talk to me about spirit said this, spirit said that, because that's not accurate. Let's get it right.
Yeah, that makes sense. Are you only a trance medium for Whitefeather, or can and do other spirits come into you?
Occasionally, there's been one or two. I know some mediums have, 3 or 4 different ones that speak through them. It's never been the case with me. I think because of, and I say this again with humility, I think because of the level that Whitefeather works with me and the quality of the information, he's often said to me that he needs that intimacy, that intimate connection, mind connection, to maintain that, to bring that level through. And even though there might be others that want to speak, he sort of hogs that, control for that reason, But I know other mediums that have several guides speak through them, but each to their own. But that's the way he works. He doesn't also, by the way, he doesn't give evidential messages. I do as a medium. I give clairvoyance, but that's with another guide. And I don't even know who that guide is. Whitefeather, he sort of confined that to knowledge and wisdom.
Awesome. Another strange question, but I mean this with all good intent. Can animals come in as well?
Yeah. I often get animals come through in readings, and I often say to people, and it sort of lifts the energy, if you like. I've got a dog here. You had a dog, and I'll just give him some evidence of that. And he's speaking to me, and I say to him, I've had to learn to speak dog or cat or horse or whatever. And animals do communicate because it's a thought process. It's an energetic process. A cat or a dog doesn't know English or whatever language, but they can communicate in thought, and the medium's mind then translates that into the meaning that they're trying to convey. So Yeah, there's a lot of lovely evidence from animals. Yeah,
So I
yeah.
know they can come in from a mediumistic aspect, but can they come in via trance like White Feather does to you? Could they do
Ah,
that?
that's another thing. I don't know really. I don't know how that would work, other than it'd be difficult to prove really. I suppose. I don't know whether they would be able to do that technically, and speak through a trance medium. I don't know. There's probably some trance mediums out there who will say, "Oh yeah, I've experienced this," or they do. So I'm open to that, but I don't know quite how it would work in terms of what they would convey. Really, I don't know. I
Hmm.
do know of animals sort of being sort of protective people, or entities, if you like, around mediums. Some people have like lions, or wolves, or as sort of guardians, if you like, doorkeepers,
Hmm.
gatekeepers, whatever you want. So they do play a role, certainly. But I've never heard of one working in trance, but I stand to be corrected on that.
Maybe it's one for you to ponder and ask your guides at some
Yeah,
stage. I wonder if
maybe,
that's something you could pick up. It's an
maybe.
interesting thought, regardless. Right,
Yeah.
before we enter the Koit zone and then begin to wrap up the conversation, I do want to ask you this one. So, through all of your experiences in life and your interactions with both people and spirits and your guides, what do you think our lives are actually for?
I think, funny enough, I was asked this, White Feather was asked this the other day, is that does life have purpose and meaning? And he said that from a God's perspective, no. But from the level of consciousness, on the level of mind, and this subjective, objective world in which we live, the human mind creates meaning, it creates purpose. There's an old saying that man takes what meanings please him. In terms of spiritual progress, the human mind likes to think it's on a pathway of development and learning, and sort of getting somewhere to sort of connect with God, wherever it thinks God is, or whatever it thinks God is, and wherever that might be. And in my understanding, that isn't the case, because we are already that. In one sense, we're already enlightened. We're already absolutely peaceful and calm and knowing and loving. It's only at this level that seems to get forgotten, at this physical level. So I don't think God's sort of got a purpose, or there's meaning to life, other than knowing God's being, knowing oneself and being that, you know. You don't need accreditations, you don't need exams, you don't need to progress through endless lives to reach some nirvana, because that is your essential nature. You're already there. It's just, I think, realizing that now, being that now, and living that, not knowing it intellectually, but living it, living your best life as that. That's the only answer I could give.
Living your best life. It's a nice sentiment to end that part of the conversation on. So thank you ever so much. We are now, though, Rob, entering the Koit zone. Koit zone! Now, in the Koit zone, this is just for me and you on an Earth-based level, trivial questions, all right? So just answer
Okay.
best you can. So, what TV show are you currently binging?
Uh, The Resident on Netflix. It's a hospital-based drama.
Any good?
Yeah, my wife loves anything to do with hospitals, or anything like that. Hospitals or crime. And it took me a while to get into it, but I was seduced into it. I think we're on episode 4 now. So apparently there's 6 series. So whether I'll still feel the same after that, I don't know.
Is there a series where there's crime in a hospital, and that would be Nirvana for her?
Well, it sort of goes into that sort of areas,
Oh, does it? Oh, there
crime
you
and,
go.
and death and blood and gore, and anything like that. She loves that.
And you're along for the ride regardless.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, tea or coffee?
Coffee.
Ooh, cheeky. Have you ever grown fruit or veg? And if so, what is your best achievement or worst
Yeah, I've
one?
had a marvelous year this year growing tomatoes in a grow bag outside, and I've had so many, I've ended up giving most of them away. We've still got a few left, but I mean, literally, I mean, I must have had over 150 tomatoes from 3 plants. It's just been phenomenal. Don't ask me why. I haven't done anything different. It's just been a good year.
See, that's strange because for us, we've got 5 or 6 tomato plants, but they've not delivered a massive amount. I don't know why. It just
No,
happens, doesn't it, like that
it's
sometimes?
hard. It depends on the location, the sunshine, the warmth, I don't know.
It's a
I'm not a
strange thing.
I haven't got green fingers, but it's just been one of those years. So.
Well, good. As long as you like tomatoes. If you don't, then
I'm getting a little tired of them at the moment. Yeah,
what's for tea? Tomatoes.
yeah.
Are you good at DIY?
Yes, to a point. My dad was good with wood and his hands, and I sort of learned from that. And I'm pretty good with anything to do with wood and screws and things. Not so good at plumbing and electrical things, but other than that, yeah, I'm okay. I like DIY. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't mind it. I think when you get your house, you might not necessarily be into it, but then over the course of time, you kind of have to, and then you like it
Yeah,
then.
yeah. Something
Weird.
crops up, and you think, God, I'm either going to have to pay a fortune to get this fixed, or I'm going to have a go at it myself.
Well, it's a
And
good learning thing anyway.
it
I
is,
like it
yeah,
from that best
it is.
perspective. What music is most played in your house?
Well, my preference would be prog rock. I'm from the age of Pink Floyd and Genesis and Yes and bands like that. I like jazz as well, Pat Metheny, people like that. I'm got a pretty broad sort of appreciation of knowledge. My wife's in a choir. She likes more choral things, and but I like rock. I'm a rock person, I'm afraid.
Are you sometimes upstairs blasting your rock and she's downstairs with the choir, and then you have to battle it
Well,
with these
we
volumes?
live on one level. We live in
Oh,
a
okay.
bungalow type building. So, but I do play keyboards. You can't see them, but I've got 3 keyboards stacked up behind me. So, I'm a closet sort of Rick Wakeman or Keith Emerson. Never got to those levels, but I still dream.
Good on you. I think music is very creative, very good for the mind and soul. I've got a keyboard here myself because I like to consider myself a musician. It's just a
Yeah,
brilliant pastime.
I'm hoping that Keith Emerson can channel through me one day. But
Yeah, I'll have Palmer, but one day you can have him.
yeah, yeah,
Somebody else can have the other one. Um,
yeah.
what famous person's death has touched you the most?
Famous person's death. I don't know really. I mean, I always remember when I don't know how old I was. I remember being at my grandmother's house, and I would have been 9 years old. It's going back a hell of a way. And I remember JFK being assassinated. And I remember hearing it on the news and seeing the footage, and that made a real impression on me. I don't know why I always sort of liked JFK, and it's probably another side to him, but he was always seemed because I was interested in as a kid in space and flying
Mm.
saucers and going to the moon, and he was the one that sort of instigated that with NASA, and I liked that energy. And then it was quite a shock when he was sort of assassinated. So it's always stuck in my mind. So that's the one that comes to mind anyway.
Well, that's the right one. It's normally if the one you think of, isn't it? Is the right one. I
Yeah,
always think like
yeah,
that.
yeah.
What's the last movie you went to see at the cinema?
Um, I don't know. Probably a Bond film, I think. Probably the last Bond film. I'm a big James Bond fan. I like Daniel Craig. Whatever the last one was, I can't remember what it was called now.
Was it Skyfall or something like
No, it
that?
was after
Or was it the one after
Skyfall. It
that?
was
It's the one where he dies,
No
yeah?
Time to Die, I think it was. No Time to Die.
Ah,
Yeah,
okay.
it was Daniel Craig's last outing as Bond. I think that was probably the last time we went.
Okay, cool. Popcorn, salt or toffee versions?
Salt, definitely.
Whoa.
Yeah, I like anything salty, anything along. I like salted peanuts. It's not good for you, I know, but I do like salt. Anything salty and tangy, right up my street. Yeah.
Get in. Bigfoot, is he real or not?
I'm open to ideas. I don't know. I don't know. It's like the Loch Ness. Is the Loch Ness monster real? You see a footage, and then another day you think, nah, somebody's fake that. Often, I think the pictures of Bigfoot look like a guy in a suit. But I don't know. I'll keep an open mind on it.
On that basis, actually, and going back to the trance stuff and the mediumship stuff, can you ask those questions? and get an answer? Like, are aliens real? Is Bigfoot real? Can you get?
Yeah. White Feather gets asked a lot of alien questions. Yeah, more and more so, and he'll give a straight answer that yeah, they are real. He's never. I don't think he's ever been asked a Bigfoot one, but he'd give an answer. I'm sure he would. He answers anything. I mean, the thing is though, a lot of the things that are answered have got to be open to scrutiny, and just because White Feather says this. He doesn't want people going away saying, "Oh well, White Feather said it, so it must be true." It's got to be able to be verified in some way,
Mm.
and he'll be the first to admit that.
I know, because if I say now outside the sky's red,
Well, I've got no way of telling that. You see, that's your perception through your mind. So
yeah,
unless you can prove that to me, then I'm going to have to sort of say, well, I'm not sure about that.
I could draw you a crayon picture. Would that be enough evidence?
Not quite, no.
Okay, right. Last question in the Koit zone. If you had the ability to become invisible, where are you going and what are you doing?
I often think I'm invisible anyway because I often walk into rooms and no one notices me. Perhaps that's a
Oh,
good thing. But then, of course, my ego cuts in and thinks, well, why haven't they noticed me? And I have to tell myself then to get real, and give myself a talking to. Where would I go if I was invisible? I don't know. I'd like to go into some of these meetings that our politicians have,
yeah.
particularly when they come out with these things that we're going to do this and we're going to do that. And I'm thinking, well, who did you discuss that with? Where's that come from? Is that from your own mind or you're being told to say that? And I go into all sort of conspiracy areas, which is another big thing for me because I've followed that and looked into that and I scrutinize everything. So,
Good on you.
much to the alarm of some of the spiritual people that I meet, and well, you haven't done that, or you believe that, and I say, well, check it out for yourself. The information's out there.
Exactly. More of these things that are called conspiracy theories aren't theories; they're facts.
They're
And they're not
facts, yeah.
Well, they are conspiracies, some of them, but most of them aren't conspiracies. But hey ho.
True.
Right, that is the end of the Koit zone, which leaves us with our final two questions before we wrap up, which is the first of, what else do you like to do in your downtime? Any activities or guilty pleasures?
I'm a big Aston Villa fan.
Oh,
I grew up. In fact, my uncle has recently passed last week. He was responsible for taking me down to the Villa when I was about 10 years old, and I've never looked back. And my daughter is a Villa fan, and certain other. My dad became a Villa fan, all from that. So I like to watch Villa play. I go down the gym 2 or 3 times a week. I like to keep fit. Like to walk, and I like to be in nature when I can, and love listening to music. Yeah, that's
pretty much
about
the
it.
same as me. That answer, apart from mine, would be Liverpool, not Villa. But
That's okay. That's
I
okay.
know.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It is okay. You're lot doing all right at the moment, actually. To be fair.
Yeah. So
There you
you're
go.
actually at top of the
Yeah.
table. So
Yeah, very good. And the last question then, before we wrap up, what are you currently working on? Is there another book, another project?
I wish I could say yes, but I haven't. I've got this lingering idea in the back of my mind of doing a book, but it's just getting myself into gear really and motivating myself. I'm so busy doing, readings and demonstrations and also mundane things like living day to day. I've got to get myself into the zone. I find with books, you need to have the space and the time to do it. It's otherwise you get pulled into all sorts of things. So
Mm.
if I can find that motivation again, I'd like to do another book because I think with all the experience I've got, and I'm sort of an elder statesman really in terms of spiritual things, mediumship and spiritualism. I think I'd like to share a bit more of that knowledge, my own experience with people. That would be my aim ultimately.
Yeah, lots to give, lots to pass on.
Hopefully, yeah. I feel I've still got something to offer. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
definitely. I think you do. Definitely. 100%. Robert, thank you ever so much for coming on. It's really appreciated your time. What I would say to everyone watching this, check out the links in the description to all Robert's socials, etc. So go and check that out now. Robert, thank you ever so much for coming on.
My pleasure. I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and
Me too.
thank you for your questions.
No worries. Thank you. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye bye.
To watch other KoitCast episodes, please click the image top left. To subscribe to my channel, please click the image top right. Please like and share to help KoitCast grow, and most importantly of all, please click the notification bell so you never miss an upload.